Welcome to the Larson Health Podcast, where we bridge science, nutrition, and functional medicine to help you heal from the inside out. I'm Kim Larson. I'm a certified functional nutrition coach. I'm a Fast Like a Girl coach, and I'm founder of LarsonNutrition.com as well as LarsonBotanicals.com. And today we're taking a deep look at ultra processed foods through a biological lens. We'll examine the population data, the controlled feeding trials, brain signaling, insulin pathways, fat cell behavior, gut microbiome changes, and how these systems interact over time. Ultra processed foods now account for approximately 57 to 60% of total caloric intake among US adults. This is staggering numbers. And more than 65% among adolescents. More and more children are becoming obese, and this is a pandemic that we really need to address. These numbers come from repeated analysis of NHANES data published in the BMJ and the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition over the last decade. That means that most calories Americans eat today come from engineered food, these products rather than real intact foods. The NOVA classification system developed by Carlos Monteiro and colleagues at the University of São Paulo categorized foods based on the degree of processing. So ultra processed foods are defined as industrial formulations composed primarily of refined starches, added sugars, isolated fats, and additives designed to enhance palatability, shelf life, and texture. I don't know if you've seen these large vats. Like if you look at health online or social media, you'll see these huge vats. I mean, they're probably as big as this room, and they're just churning up and they're just throwing in ingredients into this thing, right? So they're throwing in salt and they're throwing in soybean oil or peanut oil or some kind of oil that is not good for you. And then they're putting in all kinds of additives. And these additives are just causing so many diseases in America, causing so many problems in America. So if you go and you see a bell pepper at the store, guess what? That hasn't been churned and added additives into it. Now there could be, if it's not organic, there could be sprays on it for pesticides and weed killers on it, because a lot of these genetically modified fruits and vegetables and non-pasture raised meats are filled with toxic chemicals because of the spraying that's allowed. And the government just allowed more of the spraying to go on. So this is structural modification of food, right? Change the structure of the food and you change how the body processes it. So let's look at the long-term outcome data, because in 2019, the Nutrinet Santé cohort published findings in the BMJ after following 105,159 French adults who provided repeated 24-hour dietary records over several years. Researchers quantified the percentage of ultra-processed foods in each participant's diet using a NOVA classification system. So this is a system where they can you know add up what they're eating and the processed foods and percentages, and after adjusting for age, sex, their BMI, their body mass index, their smoking, their physical activity, their education level, their total energy intake, and overall diet quality, they found that each 10% increase in ultra processed foods intake was associated with hazard ratio of approximately 1.12 for overall cardiovascular disease. That included both heart attacks and strokes. And importantly, the association persisted even after adjusting for saturated fat, sodium, total sugar intake. This suggests that degree of processing carries independent risk signals beyond traditional nutrient categories. In the Spanish Sun cohort published in JAMA Internal Medicine in 2019, more than 44,000 adults were followed by nearly 8 years. And participants eating more than just 4 servings per day had a 62% higher risk of dying during the study period compared to those eating fewer than 2 servings per day. This is you stopping at McDonald's or Burger King or KFC or Wendy's or any of these highly processed foods where you're buying Ho-Hos and SpaghettiOs, anything in a can, anything in a package, anything that's pre-made, all these donuts and cakes and so on and so forth, prepackaged cakes. People don't make like they used to in the old days. They didn't have packages to buy. They had to make it themselves. They put together the flour and everything else. But unfortunately, our flour today in America is filled with glyphosate and all kinds of chemicals. You have to find an organic wheat or, at least there's wheats out there that are non-bromated. And non-bromated means that it hasn't been sprayed to speed up the process of making the wheat chewy and stretchy. So going back to this study, the relationship demonstrated that dose response behavior, higher intake of highly processed foods corresponded with higher mortality risk. There's people that I see that are, on social media following me or that I communicate with daily, and they're showing their food in a plastic container. They're eating out of that. That is scraping of plastic into your food, into your body. And I did a whole podcast on plastics in our body and the damage that that's causing, right? So on top of the ultra processed foods, we got all the plastics too. So the UK Biobank has reported parallel associations linking higher ultra processed food intake with obesity, hypertension, and metabolic syndrome, a pattern of insulin resistance, abdominal fat accumulation, elevated triglycerides, and rising blood pressure in people exceeding 100,000 participants. There was another study in 2022. It's an umbrella review that published in the BMJ analyzing multiple meta-analysis examining ultra-processed food intake and health outcomes. And across diverse populations, higher intake was consistently associated with increased risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, depression, and mortality. Now, I know that, organics are not available for everybody. It's crazy that when we buy organic, it's so expensive today. And when we were kids, it wasn't called organic because it all was. There was no genetically modified. There was no genetically modifying these fruits and vegetables so that you can spray all the pesticides and all the weed killers on it and it won't die. That's what's amazing about this genetically modified. So it means that they absorb the chemicals that they're putting onto those to kill the bugs, to kill the weeds, and then we're taking it in and we're seeing all of these problems are happening, but it's more the highly processed foods. I would rather you eat vegetables, fruits, and meat and butter, grass-fed butter if you can get it, a whole fat dairy, and not eat the highly processed foods because you will do so much better in your health. If you just change that, you will do so much better. So when independent people across countries show similar associations after multivariable adjustments, the pattern becomes clear. Epidemiology establishes scale and pattern. Controlled feeding trials help explain mechanism. In 2019, Kevin Hall and colleagues at the National Institute of Health conducted a randomized crossover trial in a metabolic ward setting. They published this in Cell Metabolism. A metabolic ward setting is a study where participants actually live in a research unit, kind of like instead of a metabolic ward setting, maybe a mental ward setting, right? So a metabolic ward setting is where all the participants live in a research unit where food intake, calories, movement, and metabolic measurements are all carefully controlled and tracked. They actually make the food for them. They know exactly what the contents are in them. And participants don't go home. They stay in the unit where every meal is prepared and weighed, every calorie is accounted for, including activity monitored, blood samples are taken regularly. 20 adult participants were admitted for 4 weeks. And for 2 weeks, they consumed an ultra processed diet. For 2 weeks, they consumed a whole nutritious food diet. The diets were matched for calories offered, macronutrients, sugar, fat, fiber, and sodium. Participants were allowed to eat as much as they wanted. But during the ultra processed phase, participants consumed approximately 508 additional calories per day compared to the unprocessed phase. And over 2 weeks, they gained weight, primarily fat mass. And during the unprocessed phase, they actually lost weight, right? So that wasn't whether it was organic or not. It was just they were eating protein and vegetables and fruits, and they were not eating anything that came in a box of processed whatever. And no matter how much you crave that, you've got to break the sugar addiction. Sugar is more addictive than cocaine. I want to make sure you heard that. Sugar is more addictive than cocaine. You've got to break the habit. You've got to break it. The only way to break it is to cut all that crap out of your house. Get rid of it and do it slowly. So eating rate differed significantly. Ultra processed foods were consumed approximately 17% faster. It's unbelievable. Having those ultra processed foods, you're just like, oh, 17% faster. And when you eat faster, your body has less time to register fullness. The hormones that signal you've had enough don't rise quickly enough. So you can end up eating more before your brain gets the message. And people who are eating food that were, more structured, they had less. So people ate more because of how the food was structured, right? Not because the nutrients were different. The study shifted the conversation away from carbohydrate versus fat arguments and toward structure properties of food. Highly processed foods break down faster in your system, and whole nutritious foods have fiber and structure to slow down the digestion as nature intended. Now let's move into the brain's reinforcement. The brain reinforcement system has a reward circuit that helps you learn what to repeat. When something feels important or rewarding, dopamine is released. And that dopamine strengthens the brain pathways connected to that behavior, making you more likely to do it again. And this is what the scientists do. And when they engineer these foods, they know exactly how the brain is triggered. They know all the chemistry of your body. They know the biology of your body and how it's going to work and how to motivate you to buy more, eat more, because they want to make money on you. They want to make profits. Welcome to America and letting it all happen, right? I mean, this is ridiculous. Other countries don't allow all these chemicals in the foods. They don't like all these brighteners in the food. They don't let all these colors that are bad colors into the food. They don't allow all this crap. A 2018 study published in Cell Metabolism examined how strongly the brain's reward system lights up when certain foods are eaten, combining fat and carbohydrates compared with foods contain predominantly one macronutrient. Using functional MRI, researchers demonstrated that the fat plus carbohydrate combination caused a stronger reaction in the brain than foods with the same calories that were mostly just carbs or mostly just fat. Ultra processed foods frequently combine refined starches and added fats in ways that amplify this signaling to your brain. And when the brain's dopamine system is repeatedly triggered at high levels, this leads to adaptive neuroplastic changes. So, PET imaging studies published in Nature Neuroscience and the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition have demonstrated reduced sensitivity in the brain's dopamine system with some people with obesity. Or, in plain English, PET stands for positron emission tomography. In plain English, it's a type of advanced brain scan that allows researchers to measure activity in specific brain systems, including dopamine. Unlike a standard MRI, which shows structure, a PET scan can show function. Researchers can actually attach a tiny radioactive tracer to a molecule, like one that binds to dopamine receptors, inject it, and then measure how much of that tracer binds in different parts of the brain. Reduced receptor availability reflects adaptive changes in response to repeated stimulation. Adaptive changes influence reinforcement patterns, food preference behaviors, and intake frequency. Now, layer in glycemic physiology. Ultra processed foods often contains rapidly digestible carbohydrates with minimal fiber buffering. Rapid glucose excursions lead to rapid insulin release. So, research published in Diabetes Care has demonstrated that rapid blood sugar spikes create oxidative stress and strain the lining of blood vessels. Even if your average blood sugar appears normal, the volatility matters. Frequent insulin spikes tell fat cells to keep storing energy. Over time, those fat cells expand. As they get enlarged, they start releasing more inflammatory chemicals and fewer protective hormones, which contributes to insulin resistance. Reviews in the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology. When the body is exposed to excess energy over and over again, the cells become overloaded. The mitochondria, the parts of the cell that produce energy, start to function less efficiently. At the same time, insulin signaling becomes less responsive. Glucose into cells, glucose it has a harder time getting into cells where it can be used. So when we understand that these systems are interacting, reward circuitry influencing eating behavior, glycemic volatility influencing hormonal changes, when fat cells change under repeated insulin exposure, it becomes clear why telling someone to just eat better isn't enough. If the structure is the problem, the solution has to address the structure. One of the most important shifts I work on inside Larson Nutrition is rebuilding meal structure. And what that means is teaching my clients how to consume protein intake across the day to stabilize appetite signaling, how to build fiber density into meals to support GLP-1 secretion naturally, and microbial diversity, and how to pair carbohydrates in a way that reduces postprandial glucose excursions rather than amplifying them. So when protein distribution improves, being full signaling improves. So if you start with protein and vegetables and you eat that and then you add in some avocado, I mean, how many people have eaten 10 avocados in one sitting? You can't do it. How many people have eaten 10 steaks in one sitting? You can't do it. You get too full. Now, I have seen people where they're doing juicing and they'll put in 5 stalks of celery and 2 apples and several cucumbers. Could you imagine if you actually had to eat that? If you had to eat all of that celery and all those apples and you would never even consume all of that. So that's where it's interesting is to look at making these smoothies and could you actually, if you ate all of that, you would be full sooner than if you had consumed it as a liquid. So when protein distribution improves, being full signaling improves. When fiber intake increases toward 25 to 35 grams daily, short chain fatty acid production increases. And when fiber is fermented in the gut, it produces compounds like butyrate that signal the intestine to release more GLP-1. That helps regulate insulin and appetite. That's your biology responding immediately to better food structure. Inside larsonnutrition.com, the recipes, workouts, and blog education are built around these mechanisms. They are not random health ideas. The focus is improving insulin sensitivity, protecting and rebuilding muscle, and lowering the inflammation through habits you can actually sustain. So let's get back to the biology. When fat cells are repeatedly exposed to high insulin levels, they grow larger. That's why you see people getting fatter and fatter and fatter. So as they expand, they don't just store more fat, they start functioning differently. They release fewer protective hormones like adiponectin, which adiponectin normally helps improve insulin sensitivity and supports fat burning. But when levels drop, insulin resistance increases. And as fat tissue expands, immune cells also move in. And these immune cells release additional inflammatory chemicals, which further interfere with insulin signaling. That makes it harder for glucose to enter muscle and other tissues where it can be used. Over time, this ongoing energy overload also affects the mitochondria, the energy producing structure inside muscle and liver cells, reducing how efficiently they process fuel. Now, research published in journals like The Lancet, Diabetes Endocrinology, and Nature Reviews Endocrinology shows that when cells are chronically overloaded with fuel, their energy systems becomes less efficient. Instead of fully burning fat for energy, the process becomes incomplete. So as a result, certain fat byproducts build up inside the cell. You start getting a gut, right? You start getting fatty thighs. You start getting man boobs. You start getting fatty back. You start getting fat in your face. It just all over. You get cankles right there. This is where you got fat on your ankles even. Those byproducts interfere with insulin signaling, making it harder for cells, especially muscle cells, to respond properly to insulin. This develops through repeated exposure to highly processed foods. Now, layer in the gut microbiome, right? I've talked about the gut microbiome in several of my podcasts. Ultra processed foods are typically low in resistant starch and fermentable fibers. Fiber isn't just roughage, it's the fuel your gut bacteria uses to produce beneficial compounds. It even shows that if you have plastic in your body, if you get enough fiber and you actually go for a walk, go for a 20-minute walk in the morning or in the evening, or do a 10-minute walk after every meal. This will help get rid of the plastics in your body. By getting the fiber can actually attach to the plastic and it can actually move through your body. So when certain types of fiber reach the colon, your gut bacteria break them down and produce compounds called short chain fatty acids. This is short chain fatty acids include butyrate, acetate, and propionate. And these compounds help maintain the gut lining, regulate immune activity, and stimulate hormones that influence blood sugar and appetite. Reduced fiber intake correlates with reduced microbial diversity. Lower diversity in the gut microbiome is linked to obesity and insulin resistance, higher levels of inflammation. This additive exposure also matters. A 2015 study in Nature found that common food emulsifiers altered the gut microbiome in mice and promoted weight gain and impaired glucose regulation. The gut and brain are tightly connected, and bacteria products can influence neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. So, this brings us back to the reward circuitry. When engineered foods become the norm, the reward system adjusts. Blood sugar swings, drive stress hormone changes. Rising inflammation affects how the brain functions. These systems do not operate independently, they compound, right? You just keep eating more processed foods, it just keeps compounding. And when we talk about restoration, it cannot be superficial. This is why I emphasize resistance training so heavily in my programs. Skeletal muscle is the largest site of insulin mediated glucose. Let me say that again. Skeletal muscle is the largest site of insulin mediated glucose disposal. Start light. Start just doing some air squats. Do some 5 pounds if you have 5 pounds or 3 pounds, or do some soup cans or do a gallon of milk and do some bicep curls. Do some hammer curl to a shoulder raise. Use what you have. If you can afford to do the weights, just do it. Go out for a walk and walk with some weights in your hands. I mean, just follow people online, follow on YouTube, follow someone on there and do a class with them. Follow on social media. There's tons of people out there who are working out, and you can see what they're working out with, and you can follow along. Pause the video to get all your reps in. Just do it. Lifting weights makes your muscles better at clearing sugar from your blood, even if you're insulin resistant. Inside Larson Nutrition workouts, strength training is not aesthetic focused, it is metabolic focused. Increasing lean mass improves resting metabolic rate. So, meaning that if while you're sleeping, when you have muscle, it is burning calories the whole time, 24/7. It's like a store that is open, but for your body, muscle just burns calories all day long. This enhances glucose disposal and it reduces the burden placed on fat tissue. When protein intake supports muscle repair, so when you work out, you're tearing your muscles, and your body will naturally just go in and repair those muscles. But you got to give it protein to help support that muscle repair. And then the fiber supports the microbial ecology, and resistance training improves the insulin signaling. So we begin reversing structural damage. Now, also consider your mental health data. A 2022 study published in Public Health Nutrition examined dietary patterns and depressive symptoms. Higher ultra processed food intake was associated with increased likelihood of depressive symptoms. When inflammation rises, it influences the brain chemicals that regulate mood and the body's stress response. Blood sugar swings further impact cognitive performance and emotional stability. So, when the diet structure influences inflammation and inflammation influences the mood, the conversation expands beyond weight, right? It's about resilience. Resilience requires consistency in inputs. Right? If you start lifting weights, you're not going to see a change right away. You're not going to see, like, if you're doing hammer curls or bicep curls or shoulder presses or sit ups or push ups or planks, you're not going to see a difference right away. But give it 6 weeks, be patient, keep going, just keep going, and you're going to see a change in your body. Start eliminating the ultra processed foods, start adding in whole nutritious foods, and you will see. And then do fasting. I talk about fasting all the time. This can help repair your gut. It can help get rid of those old dying cells, clean it all out, get your body fresh, and start new. So, when ultra processed foods dominate, blood sugar swings increase, the reward signaling intensifies, and inflammation rises. The body adapts to that environment. When we begin restoring structure, protein distribution, fiber density, resistance training, sleep regulation, we're not just chasing short term weight loss, we are recalibrating signaling pathways. So, when you increase intact fiber and protein, the gut releases hormones that help regulate appetite and blood sugar. One of those hormones is GLP-1. Right? So all these people are on GLP-1s. I refuse to go on GLP-1s because as soon as you're on them, it requires you to be on them for life. Otherwise, you put the weight back because you never learn how to eat right. If you eat right, you will produce your own GLP-1s and you won't need to go on these shots because when that hormone GLP-1 slows digestion or the foods that you're eating, the proteins and the fiber, that slows digestion and it supports insulin release and helps you feel full. As the signaling improves, appetite becomes more stable. When blood sugar spikes are reduced, the liver produces less fat from excess glucose, which I think is interesting. And repeated spikes drive fat buildup in the liver over time. So, structuring carbohydrates around fiber and protein helps prevent that. Resistance training strengthens skeletal muscles and improves how efficient it burns fuel. As muscle becomes more metabolically active, so meaning it's active in burning calories, insulin sensitivity improves and the body becomes better at switching between burning carbohydrates and fat. Are you hearing me? Because the body becomes better at switching between burning and carbohydrates and fat. So metabolic flexibility is a marker of resilience. And that's why metabolic flexibility, I love to fast, intermittent fast, and fast for 24, 48, or 72 hours. And that helps build metabolic flexibility in your body. Now, consider cumulative toxic load beyond nutrition. If we're working to lower inflammation, improve our cellular energy, and stabilize hormones, it makes sense to look at environmental exposures too. We have all these chemicals and cleaning supplies and in our skincare and the candles that we burn in our house and the plugins that we have. The skin isn't just a surface barrier, it's a biologically active unit of our body. It interacts with what we put on it, and it plays a role in immune and inflammatory responses. And repeated exposure to synthetic fragrances, parabens, phthalates, and volatile organic compounds contribute to overall chemical burden. Improving nutrition without addressing environmental exposure only goes part of the way. That's why Larson Botanicals exists. The formulations focus on non-toxic organic ingredient skincare and candles designed to support individuals moving toward a lower toxic lifestyle. So when you are working to improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammatory signaling, and build metabolic health, aligning what you put on your body and into your environment with that goal strengthens the overall strategy. Non-toxic skincare reduces unnecessary endocrine disrupting compounds. Clean burning candles reduce volatile chemical exposure within the home. And these adjustments are not dramatic interventions, they are cumulative corrections. You can explore these products at larsonbotanicals.com as part of building a more aligned, lower burden environment. Now let's return to the physiology. Nutrition matters, but environment matters too. Reducing inflammatory load through dietary fiber, improved omega 3 to omega 6 balance, adequate sleep, And strength training shifts the signaling over time. It takes time. It took time for you to get fat. It'll take time for you to get rid of the inflammation. Sleep itself is a metabolic regulator. Reduced sleep disrupts hunger hormones, reduces insulin sensitivity, it increases reward-seeking behavior. "Ooh, I want those potato chips, I want those potato chips. I want those donuts, I want those Ho-Hos, I want the" whatever it is, right? It increases that desire to grab those things that are not good for you. So when sleep is consistently shortened, cravings for calorie-dense foods increase. So I wanna go to get a Boston cream, and I wanna fill it with custard, and I wanna get, bread and have some processed meats. I mean, all this stuff is ugh. I can't tell you when I try these things now because I've been eating so clean, it just tastes disgusting to me. It does not taste good. So that reinforcing the cycle, the reward system influences what we eat, and what we eat affects blood sugar. Blood sugar affects insulin. Insulin influences fat storage, inflammation, and inflammation feeds back into the brain. You got to break the cycle, and this requires multiple inputs shifting simultaneously. From a practical standpoint, the first shift is often protein adequacy. Many individuals consuming highly processed food diets are under consuming protein relative to needs. Distributing 25 to 40 grams of high quality protein per meal supports muscle protein synthesis and satiety signaling. The second shift is fiber restoration. Most Americans consume approximately 15 grams of fiber daily. Targeting 25 to 35 grams daily through legumes, vegetables, berries, and resistant starch increases short chain fatty acid production and improves microbial diversity. The third shift is resistance training, 2 to 4 times per week to improve skeletal muscle insulin sensitivity. Now, I love to do some yoga because we are challenging and using our body strength all the time. We're in a plank pose, then we go to a downward dog, and then we're back up again, or we're stretching out and we're balancing ourselves and we're lifting up a leg, we're moving it over, right? I feel like I'm a bird standing on one leg like but it really helps with our balance because as we get older, it doesn't get easier. You gotta keep on top of it. The fourth shift is sleep stabilization to restore hormonal rhythm. Inside larsonnutrition.com, these pillars are structured into implementable frameworks. Recipes are built around protein sufficiency and fiber density. Workouts are programmed around progressive overload and metabolic improvement. Blog education translates this research into action. This is not about eliminating all ultra processed foods overnight. It's about reducing the dominance and rebuilding structure. Remember that study about they instead of eating 4 ultra processed, they went to 2? Even that would help. And then break it down to 1, only have 1 ultra processed, and then start realizing the deliciousness of whole nutritious foods. Put in whatever spices you like. If you don't like it spicy, just put in some garlic and some, celery salt or something. If you like it spicy, put in all the heat you like. When dominance shifts, signaling shifts. So over time, taste recalibrates, reward signaling stabilizes, blood sugar swings narrow, and inflammation declines. The body adapts to consistent input. Change the environment, and physiology follows. Fasting insulin falls, A1C stabilizes, your triglycerides decrease, your HDL improves, your waist circumference drops. These are not cosmetic markers. These are structural indicators of metabolic improvement. Now, return to the dopamine adaptation for a moment, because this is where many people misunderstand the process. The brain's dopamine system adapts to repeated exposure. When highly palatable foods dominate the diet, The reward system becomes conditioned to expect intense stimulation. And when those foods are reduced and whole nutrient dense foods become primary, the system gradually stabilizes. That recalibration takes time. It happens through repetition. As exposure changes, taste preferences shift, and reinforcement patterns adjust. This is why extreme restriction often fails. It tries to suppress cravings instead of retaining the system. And rebuilding structure works because it changes the signals. As reward signaling stabilizes and blood sugar swings narrow, stress hormones also improve. So, cortisol follows a daily rhythm, rising in the morning and declining through the day. But poor sleep and unstable blood sugar disrupt that rhythm. Structured meals and consistent sleep help restore it. As visceral fat decreases, that's that fat that's in your organs. That's kind of the hidden, like you could be a skinny fat and have all kinds of fat in the organs of your body. So that's why, as visceral fat decreases through strength training, adequate protein and better sugar control helps your inflammation decline. And that further improves metabolic health. Now consider your mitochondrial resistance again. Mitochondria adapt to demand. So when you challenge your body through resistance training and provide adequate nutrients, your cells increase their energy production capacity. And when excess fuel consistently overwhelms the system, energy production becomes less efficient and oxidative stress rises. Whole nutritious foods provide antioxidants like polyphenols, carotenoids, and vitamin C that help protect and support those energy systems. Ultra processed foods tend to be high in calories but low in the micronutrients that support cellular function. Shifting toward intact foods increases antioxidant exposure naturally. This is another area where alignment matters beyond diet alone. Environmental exposures matter. Synthetic fragrances and indoor pollutants add to the body's stress load, right? If you have dust all over your house and you're not cleaning your house, just get a damp cloth or get some cloths that are meant for dusting your furniture, dust your furniture, carpeting. Oh my God, carpeting. I can't wait to get rid of our carpeting in our house. We vacuum on a regular basis, but that has all kinds of toxins in it. Reducing those inputs, supporting metabolic health. Larson Botanical candles are formulated with non-toxic, clean-burning ingredients designed to reduce indoor air burden compared with conventional paraffin-based products. I love to have a good smelling home, and right now I'm into the peppermint. So I don't know why I'm into the peppermint, but I have peppermint candles going all over the house. I'm getting ready to get into spring scents, and so I'm getting ready to start making more candles, getting ready for spring and summer. So look out for those to have a nice, clean, burning scent in your home. So when you already are working to reduce inflammatory signaling through nutrition and exercise, minimizing environmental irritants reinforces that work. Likewise, non-toxic skincare reduces cumulative exposure to endocrine disrupting compounds that may interfere with hormonal balance. And hormone signaling, particularly estrogen and thyroid pathways, influences metabolic rate and insulin sensitivity. How does cumulative input over time? Now we'll zoom out to public health trajectory. Cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death in the United States. Type 2 diabetes is rising very quickly, and fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is increasing in both adults and adolescents. This is all from the same ultra processed foods, right? Because during the same time, while all these things are increasing, ultra processed foods have taken over much of the modern diet. The consumption of highly processed foods is increasing. And as ultra processed foods have increased, metabolic disease rates have risen. It's no surprise, right? You eat more highly processed foods, you get more disease. You eat less processed foods, you are more healthy, you lose weight, you have no disease. The people who have all these diseases, there's an analogy of death, right? And it's a long, painful death when you're eating all these highly processed foods. Your life is healthy until you're about 30, maybe even less if you've been doing it all your life, and then you just start having disease and more disease because you're eating all these highly processed foods, and it just keeps declining, and you're just suffering, and you're on all kinds of drugs, and one drug interacts with the other drug, and it's just a metabolic mess, ruining. The American government does not care about the foods that we have in on our bodies, the skincare that we put on our bodies, the foods that we're putting into our system. You have to read the labels, and some people are too lazy to do that. I read every label of every product that I'm looking at. I buy peanut butter and it says it's organic, but I look at all the ingredients in it. Does it have oil added in it, or is it just peanuts and salt? I just want organic peanuts and salt. I don't want any extras added in there. You don't need extras added into anything. If you're eating whole nutritious foods, there are no additives. So as ultra processed foods have increased, metabolic disease rates have risen, right? The foundation is simple. Eating whole nutritious foods, strength training, getting your sleep, and lowering your toxic exposure will help you get to a healthier life. And inside Larson Nutrition programs, these principles are integrated rather than isolated. Clients learn how to build meals that combine protein, fiber, and healthy fats to moderate glycemic response. They follow progressive strength programming to increase lean mass and improve insulin sensitivity. And they receive education through blog insights that explain the physiology behind each recommendation. Understanding the research is empowering. Applying it consistently changes trajectory. And when ultra processed foods move from dominant to occasional, signaling stabilizes. As muscle mass increases, glucose control improves. And as fiber intake rises, the gut becomes more diverse. And as inflammation declines, cellular energy systems function more efficiently. Over time, these changes compound. The body reflects the inputs it receives consistently. And as the reward system stabilizes and blood sugar swings narrow, fat cell inflammation decreases, your mitochondrial function improves, your gut signaling strengthens. Hormones like GLP-1, which help regulate blood sugar and appetite, work more effectively. The system becomes more resilient. Metabolic flexibility simply means the body can switch between burning carbohydrates and fat efficiently and maintaining stable hormonal rhythms. And this is cumulative recalibration, and it is possible. Now let's bring it all together. Ultra processed foods alter the structure of the food supply. At scale, they are linked to higher cardiometabolic risk. In controlled trials, they increase intake even when calories and macronutrients are matched. They amplify reward signaling, increase blood sugar swings, they promote the fat cell enlargement, they drive inflammation, they strain your cellular energy systems, and they disrupt your gut signaling. Again, your gut and brain are connected. And when that exposure dominates, physiology shifts towards dysfunction. And when structure is restored, physiology shifts toward resilience. You can listen to the Larson Health Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and watch full episodes on YouTube. I share continuous insights and little snippets on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn, where we continue this conversation around metabolic health, nutrition, strength training, and hormone resilience. And if you're ready to begin your foundation through structured nutrition, research-based recipes, progressive strength training, and ongoing education, visit larsonnutrition.com and reach out to me. And if you're working toward reducing cumulative environmental burden while supporting your body from the outside in, explore the non-toxic skincare and clean burning candles at larsonbotanicals.com. And thank you for listening today. I look forward to continuing this conversation with you next week.